Okay, greetings and welcome to Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. Today's date is the 30th of November 2025, and I'm Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu in the studio with, hopefully, just have a quick check, Sister Oleander. Are you there? Can you hear us okay?
Yes. Greetings, everybody. Hope everybody's well.
Excellent. Okay, and as usual, we're going to go over some of the community-related news from the past couple of weeks. It's always fantastic if you can give us a check to let us know that you can hear us, that you can see us okay. Oleander will be manning the chats. And so just giving us a quick check. And as usual, if you're watching live, you're free to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, whichever platform it is. And as always, I will say, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful. I want to get straight on. We have a jam-packed program as usual. And the first section, as you will know, is where we go to libations. So this is where we talk about those have recently passed and mention any notable anniversaries. So the first libation is going to go to a man. Hopefully, you see the images, needs no introduction. He goes, originally, his name was James Chambers, but he's known professionally as Jimmy Cliff. And he joined the Ancestors this week, unfortunately, at the age of 81. He's a singer, an actor, and in many ways, Reggae's first ambassador. He had many hits from Many Rivers to Cross, Wonderful World, Beautiful People. You can get it if you really want. And if you're looking at the image on the screen, the famous one at the bottom, of course, The Harder They Come, which was a classic and also was the sound, the title track of a film which he acted in. Now, Professor Michael Riley wrote that Jimmy Cliff was the architect who built reggae's pathway to global recognition. And he's very right there, because in many ways, it was his signing and his success that led to Bob Marley becoming signed to Ireland. And the whole idea of the industry recognizing that reggae had this mass appeal. And he joins the Ancestors on the 24th of this month. And of course, he's left an amazing legacy and will be deeply missed. The next ancestor is Viola Ford Fletcher. Now, for those of you who are not aware, she's the survivor of the 1921 Tulsa massacre. She was an author, then the title of her book, Don't Let Them Bury My Story, and she joined the Ancestors aged 114. Now, it's very difficult to talk about the Tulsa massacre without becoming angry and emotional. But our ancestor carried the memory of watching her, and it was a very prosperous African-American community burn, while neighbors and people of European heritage murdered them and destroyed the generational wealth that they had built up. It was known colloquially as Black Wall Street. It took a very long time to get any sort of justice for those atrocities that took place, and she was 106 years of age when Congress finally let her testify to what she witnessed on that terrible, terrible day. In fact, it was more, I think it was 2 days, over 2 days. Anyway, Congress promised to investigate the issue of reparations, but to this very day, those promises remain unfulfilled. She sought accountability. She sought justice for one of the worst episodes of racialized violence in the history of the United States, the enslavement of African people. For those of you who are unfamiliar with some of the works, or some of that history, I should say, you may want to watch the TV series starring Regina King called The Watchmen, and it's an adaptation of a graphic novel. But throughout this whole series, The Watchmen, they cover the incidents that took place at Tulsa, the massacre in 1921, with detail. It's an amazing series. She was an amazing woman, and we remember. The next libation is for our young prince, Marcus Ficana, Now, his funeral took place on the 14th of this month. He was the young teenager who was jailed in Dubai. You may remember we covered that story. And then on his return to the UK after he was pardoned, um, he lost his life and passed away after a fatal police chase. Now, his family has described him as a cherished brother, cousin, and friend whose presence lit up every room he entered. It's a loss so tragic. Um, remember. The next libation is to Mel Rudder. Now, our sister is being mourned in the music industry at this moment. She was known as a radio plugger initially. She founded an organization called 33 Music. It's very difficult to find details of her age and date of birth, so apologies, we only have the date of her passing. It looks like she was around 43 to 47 when she joined the Ancestors. She started her career on the street team for Atlantic East West Records in 2000, and she later became the head of the London street team. This is while she was at university. Upon graduating, she worked in club promotions for Warner Music. She moved through to Atlantic's national promotion department, where she managed specialist radio and TV strategies for campaigns. And then after 15 years of working inside the industry for these major labels, she founded her own company. And this is where she started consulting for artists domestically and internationally. She also was engaged in the launch of One Vibe. This was a non-profit organization which supported the young people affected by the Grenfell Tower tragedy. And she's worked with major artists like Burna Boy, Anne-Marie, Bruno Mars, and Ed Sheeran. Again, it's not one of those names that if you're not in the music industry, you may be aware of, but her contribution was significant. And one of the quotes that she's left with, that one of the piece of advice she has for young artists, and I also think it's something for people to take across life. She says, look, when you're in the industry, hold your nerve. Just because someone said no, doesn't mean it's no forever. It might just mean not yet. And she's really clear about explaining that the rejection in the music industry is common. It's quite a cutthroat industry. It's just to use her words. So don't see no as a solid no. See it as a not yet and just keep persevering. We remember. Now, the next libation goes to Dr. Cecil Belfield Clark. He was a Bayesian doctor and activist and also advisor for the Ghanaian government in helping to train their doctors. He was in a private practice in Elephant and Castle area for more than 40 years, and he devised an important weight-based formula for calculating the pediatric dose of a drug, which became known as the Clark's rule. Now, this is amazing in itself, but he was also an executive committee member of the League of Coloured Peoples. Among the first members of the organization were C.L.R. James, Jomo Kenyatta, Una Morrison, and Paul Robeson. He was also the co-convener of the Conference on the African People's Democracy and World Peace in London during July 1939. So we remember his passing. We remember his contributions. Asha. And the last libation for this week is one that's a tragic one, all tragic, but this one in particularly hit hard if you were around when this took place. This is, of course, the passing of Damilola Olufemi Taylor, who joined the Ancestors at the age of 10. Now, Damilola was stabbed in the leg with a broken bottle while walking home from Peckham Library after a long day at school. Now, he managed to reach a stairwell in a nearby housing estate, but he collapsed and died from severe blood loss. It sent shockwaves through the community when this took place. And as a result of kind of that horrific tragedy, his legacy has now grown to include the Damilola Taylor Trust, which was founded by his parents to support young people from their education and fight against youth violence. His background is not unfamiliar for many people from the diaspora. His family moved from Nigeria to London to give their children the better opportunities. And unfortunately, he was taken from us at such an age. We also now know that his parents, Richard and Gloria Taylor, have since passed, having spent the rest of their life since his killing campaigning against knife violence. It's a tragic way to end this section, but it's important that remember we still have violent knife crime amok in the capital across the UK. That Laura Taylor was one of those moments that woke everyone up to the tragedy of that situation. We remember. And that's the end of that section, the migration section. You are watching the Galleys Pan-African Community News Update. Just as a reminder, if you are watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful. Sister Oleander is in the studio, so she should be able to share your comments. It'll be good to know that you're out there and that you can hear us and see us all okay. But I'm going to continue on. And this is the next section, which looks at domestic news affecting our community over the past 2 weeks. Now, the first story is one about, I don't know if you remember, we spoke about this, Jenga, which was the Joint Enterprise Legal Doctrine. And with this situation, the convictions of 3 young men who were convicted of murder after this Joint Enterprise Legal Doctrine came into place is now up for review. The Criminal Cases Review Commission, the CCRC, have said that there's now new evidence submitted on behalf of, and the men who were convicted are Durrell Gulo, Rihanna Waters, and Trey Wilson, who were 20, 19, and 19, respectively, when they were convicted, undermines the core of the prosecution's case that they were members of a gang. I don't know if you remember how Jenga works. The whole argument is that if you're present at an incident where a crime takes place, then you are also culpable. There's, you are part of you are part of that criminal act. And as a result, what's happened is in this particular case, the 4 were prosecuted after the murder in 2016 of Abdul Wahab Fadiha, 18 years old in the picture. He came from, he lived in Manchester. And even though one teenager, Devonte Cottrell, who was 19 at the time, committed the fatal stabbing, 7 defendants were convicted of murder, 4 of manslaughter under the Joint Enterprise Law. And this is where the miscarriage of justice can take place. And this is what now we're finding that it looks like it was an unsafe conviction, which is what we've been arguing, and many people have been arguing all along. Now, lawyers for the men, who remember who were teenagers at the time, argued in their 2023 application to the CCRC, the review panel, that the gang narrative advanced at the trial was based on racist stereotypes of African boys and young men, and that the convictions resulted from institutional racism by the police, prosecution, and judge. Now, a series of reviews and academic research has found that African boys and young men are disproportionately portrayed as being in gangs are subjected to this joint enterprise or prosecutions based around that. So we can only but hope that once the new evidence has been heard, that any miscarriage of justice is overturned. The next story is one where our counsellor, Thelma Odoo, she works in Newham, has been recruited by the Black Health Legacy for a study which aims to break down generational barriers that is hindering the inclusion of Africans, from in the UK from participating in health research. Now, there's many reasons why people of African heritage do not engage in health research. This goes back to the abuse of African people, not just in the UK, but also in America and across the world. I'm not going to go through that history. But this particular organization, the Black Health Legacy, is sort of engaged in this new project It's a landmark study. It's been funded by the Wellcome Trust. It's been launched by Queen Mary University, and they're hoping to find and treat health diseases that disproportionately affect people with African heritage. Now, what they have found out while they're doing this work is that less than 3% of the global genetic data comes from people of African heritage. And this means that any genetic studies and findings or treatments that come from that database don't work for everyone. And that's what they want to change. That's what I want to change. So they're working to build trusted, inclusive research practices and break down deep-rooted social and historical barriers to improve the health of future generations. It's a laudable aim. It's a very important study. It's a lot to get through, trying to encourage trust in those institutions. I think, we kind of need to believe that the practitioners are also of African heritage and are also ethical, before it's going to change. But the study aims to become the largest research effort of its kind, recruiting thousands of participants, and with some brief paperwork. And what they're using, what they call a simple spit test, taking only 10 minutes, they're going to start trying to turn things around. And so Councillor Thelma Oddy has kind of like walked up and used herself to start this rolling. And she says, I'm so glad I participated in the project. I can only imagine the benefits if the generations before had the opportunity to partake in a project like this. I'm going to leave that there. Go to the next story. And this one is a tragic one. We now know that Romeo Gordon, 22 years of age, was part of a group of knives who were effectively hunting as a pack when they came into the house of Cameron Smith, the boy, the 16-year-old boy you see in the bottom picture, in Croydon in July 2021. Now, Cameron's mother tried to protect her son when these boys kicked down the door, and she even tried to take the knife from one of the attackers. But what we've now found out in the court case is that when they arrived at the address, they had a plan to cause injury. They knew they were carrying knives. Some of them were machetes. And the judge has said Cameron was killed in front of his mother in her bedroom. And I cannot think of anything worse for a mother to see. Mrs. Johnson, the mother, was so desperate to protect her son, she tried to grab the large black zombie blade, a knife, which had a serrated curved blade, which was 16 inches, that's 40 centimeters in length. She then stood arm outstretched in between her son and the group in a vain attempt to stop them. But within minutes, Cameron had been surrounded and fatally stabbed at the property. It's a horrific case, and they have been sentenced. But yeah, it's important for us to not shy away from the levels of violence that also takes place within our community, which we all have a responsibility to address. The next story is one of historians from Edinburgh who decided that they're going to investigate slavery and the law in British Guiana, which is now called Guyana. It was called British Guiana at the time, in this new 3-year-long project. Now, an international team is going to analyze the testimony of hundreds of enslaved people who sought legal redress for the abuses and hardships that they endured under the British slavery system. The project will be groundbreaking, as the digital resource it will create is being built from words spoken by the enslaved people themselves rather than the data about them. So this will be a time to really engage in kind of like, their own narratives and learn from that and be able to access it. So the project, which is called Voices in Slavery's Archive, Law, Place and Testimony in British Guiana, is going to digitize, map and analyze the largest collection of first-person testimony of enslaved people from the Caribbean in existence. The records are going to be held in the UK National Archives, and this is going to allow researchers to examine how enslaved people used the courts to make complaints related to family life, wealth, work, health, violence, and a host of other issues. And this sort of information is crucial, especially if you remember what we learned about, I've forgotten what it was called now, about project where the British government just deleted the archives which showed their colonial crimes. So we need to continue archiving our history. This is so crucial that we do these kind of things. The next story is one that we've been covering for quite a few months. And this is about the former soldier Robert James Purkis, 38, who is alleged of murdering Agnes Wanjiru during a night out at a hotel near his military training camp in March 2012. Now, he's actually appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court earlier this month. For those of you who don't remember, I own Toyin. She was 21 years of age, she had a 5-month-year-old baby, and she was discovered in a septic tank near the hotel in the town of Nanyuki 3 months after she had gone missing. Now, the court has heard the testimony again that at least one army colleague heard how Robert James Purkis had said that he had killed Agnes Wanjiru during the night out at his hotel near the military training camp in March 2012. Of course, Purkis's lawyer deny murder, and they intend to contest the extradition. But he was arrested by specialist officers from the National Crime Agency's extradition unit after a warrant was issued in September. We also know that there was an inquest into our sister Agnes Wanjiru's death, which was open in 2018, and it's the continuous pressure from the family, as well as Kenyan rights groups and other members like feminist and human rights groups, that led to the stage where we may become closer to securing justice for our sister Agnes Wanjiru. The next story is one, we seem to be on the theme of justice this week. The daughter of Alpha Kelly, North Yorkshire man, who suffered an inhumane, degrading and undignified death in prison, has been settled after a High Court legal claim against the government. Now, Melanie Kelly took legal action against the Ministry of Justice and the City Healthcare Practice, which provides health and care services. The word care, I think, is out of place here, under the Human Rights Act over the death of her father. Now, our elder, or deceased, our ancestors now, Calais, who was born in Sierra Leone, lived in Edinburgh near Selby when sentenced. He passed away aged 74 in January 2021 after contracting COVID while serving jail at HMP Hull. The prison service did say it was sorry that he did not receive adequate support in his final days. But the CHCP said when it carried out its reviews, it found that there was serious incidents that occurred in its services. There's not much I can say about this, because now it has been settled. It's just important to understand that, like I said, he contracted COVID while in prison. He was initially put in a well-being unit before eventually being taken to Hull Royal Infirmary, where he was diagnosed with type 1 respiratory failure and stage 3 acute kidney injury. There are many who feel that if someone's in prison, then they don't deserve human rights. They deserve to be treated with dignity. And of course, if you're watching this program, you should not be one of them, and you're most likely not going to be one of them, because a coroner found that staff had repeatedly failed to correctly assess Kelly, and they discovered he was dehydrated, he was cold, he was confused, unable to communicate while dressed in soiled clothing. His daughter was traumatized because he was seen as a problem, not a person. And even though it's good that the government has settled, this should clearly not have happened in the first place. And I don't have confidence that this sort of attitude where African people are dehumanized and prisoners are dehumanized is not going to happen again. The next story, when we talk about dehumanization and government, well, we spoke about this one a couple of weeks ago, and the government has made a decision that the 8-year-old princess who was left destitute in Jamaica after Hurricane Melissa has been barred from coming to the UK to join her parents. Now, her mother, as you may remember, Carrie-Ann Bigby, who's a carer, moved from Jamaica to be with Latianas, that's the young 8-year-old's name, British father, Jerome Hardy, and he's a telecommunication worker. And she had left her daughter to be cared for by her grandmother. Now, the couple married this year, and after saving up for the £4,000 visa application for her daughter, they tried to get her to join them, and they applied in June. But then after the hurricane, the couple urged the Home Office to expedite the visa decision, saying, look, an emergency situation has occurred with this hurricane, because the house that they lived in was completely destroyed, and the grandmother was no longer physically able to look after her. Now, if you look in the image, you can see the condition of the house after the hurricane. Yet, in its refusal letter, the Home Office stated, and this is directly to the 8-year-old Latiana, I don't know how this works. While it is acknowledged the effects of the natural disaster have significantly affected you and the wider population of Jamaica, I am also aware that you continue to reside with family members. Stating that your grandmother is unable to provide care, evidence of this has not been demonstrated. It has therefore not been demonstrated that you cannot be cared for by relatives in the country you currently reside. Now, this is devastating news, and of course, Latiana's parents are heartbroken by this decision. They said they're going to appeal it, but their lawyer is just reminding them that right now there's an appeals backlog of over 100,000 cases, and it can take up to 2 years for an appeal to be heard. So in the meanwhile, we have a young 8-year-old who's been forcibly separated now from her parents, even though they've done everything right. They've saved the money for the appeal, they've made the application. The hurricane that destroyed her house was nothing to do with them. That wasn't their fault. The grandmother who was looking after her, which is traditional in Norway, this is not unusual. It's reached an age where she can't do this. And now they're saying rather than her coming to join her parents in the UK, she can just travel around Jamaica from family to family while they have to now try for another appeal. It's an outrageous situation. It's a Labour government that's making these decisions. It's very important to remember that. And the final story for this particular section is that of a Sudanese woman whose house was daubed with racist graffiti. And she said she's not going to leave her house in Londonderry. Now, Londonderry is an island, Northern Ireland. The words local only, which you can see in the image, alongside the crosshair symbol, was sprayed overnight on the property. And the crosshair, locals only, is it looks like to me a coded way of saying, we're targeting you. And, you are a migrant. You're not one of us. You're not local. Therefore, you've got to go. Now, thankfully, the police are treating the incident in Fountain Estate as a racially motivated hate crime. What's very interesting is that we also have heard that the Metropolitan Police will no longer, or they're talking about no longer recognizing hate crimes and will investigating them. So these kind of things people will be able to do without any fear of repercussion. But in this particular case, the mother, she said, look, I'm happy to stay here. The Fountain is our first choice and we are going to stay. Now, she moved into the area in 2024 and she's made it a home. What's hurt her is when her daughter saw the graffiti on her way to catch a bus to school, and she'd come in and she was confused and didn't understand why anyone had written that. And when she had to learn what it meant, of course, she was upset. So we'll keep an eye on this story. The Northwest Migrants Forum in the area has said you have to do everything to support the family, and it's urged politicians to condemn this awful act. So that's the last of the story of that section. Let me go to the next page. grab a swig of water. Please forgive me. My voice is starting to croak. Mm. You are watching the Galley's Pan-African Community News Update. If you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful. It's always helpful if you can hear us okay. Send us a message, whether it's a quick chat, hi, you can hear us, can't, you can see us, or you might have a comment you want to make or something like that. It's your program. Sister Oleander is manning the chat. But what I'm going to do now is go for the next section, which is a review of the politics around the UK that have taken place over the last couple of weeks. And I'm going to start with the first story. It's not many this particular week. And this is probably the biggest story of the last couple of weeks. And this is where Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has claimed that the government has failed to show the necessary toughness to enforce the removal of families whose asylum claims have been refused. And this is, her words. The government hasn't been necessarily tough enough to remove families. So what she's proposed is this new cruel immigration and asylum proposal, which copies aspects of the Danish model, which hasn't even worked for the Danish. And in the policy document, which was published on the 17th, the government has now set out its plans for the biggest shake-up of asylum laws in 40 years. Now, many of us will, of course, remember the policies put forward by Priti Patel, the policies put forward by Suella Braverman, and how bad all of these policies were. Well, this is actually going even further than those policies. And I find it difficult to say that these are worse, but I'm branded them hostile environment version 2. I know other people aren't saying that, but I'm going to say that. This is like Windrush 2. This is hostile environment 2, but coming from a Labour government. Because if you look at the document, it says many families of failed asylum seekers continue to live in this country, receiving free accommodation and financial support for years on end. So what the government is proposing is not only are they going to offer financial, contribution for them to leave, which is a good thing. People want to say like, okay, we can make our way back, help us to do so. But they're also saying that if you don't take that support, we're going to escalate an enforced return process. And so right now the government is consulting on this. And this is about enforcing removal of families, including children. Be very clear about that. So if you're an asylum seeker, you've kind of like come to the UK because you're fleeing conflict, fleeing persecution, then the government decides that the place that you're fleeing from, so imagine it was, when was that recent? Assad. So Syria. So imagine it was Syria, and you was, pushing against the government, and then of course, you get a coup that takes place, and they say that you're free to go back. You know that your life will be in danger. Well, the British government is now saying no. We're going to forcibly remove all of you, including your children that are born in the UK. Now, as part of the aforementioned consultation, they're going to be looking at the 2016 Immigration Act, which allows them to remove support from families who do not have what they call a genuine obstacle to leaving the country. And their plan, this is from Shabana Mahmood, is to, if you have any assets, and when I say assets, I'm not talking about shares in like BP or Tesla. I'm talking about, you see that little chain around her neck in the picture? That's an asset as far as the British government is saying. And they've actually said jewellery. So if you've got jewellery or an e-bike or a car, the government will seize it and sell it. And that's what they're going to use to pay for your, to remove you or for any aid that you might need while you're here in the UK. Now, this policy is so immoral, it's so outrageous that a Church of England bishop has said that her comments on asylum seekers have shaken him to the core. And the church itself is arguing it's arguing against people who come to the UK being scapegoated. So, I don't know what else I can say about this. This is a new policy. It's framed in the language of asylum seekers, but of course, it extends to a hostile climate for all migrants. How do you know who's asylum seeker head, who's a migrant. This is kind of like a moving towards the policies used by the Orange One in the White House, where you have ICE-type enforcement teams snatching people off the streets, forcing them and their children onto planes. This is a Labour government. This happened within the last couple of weeks. They're consulting on it now. We'll keep an eye on this policy. It's outrageous. And I have colleagues who, who work in the UK, legitimately on visas, who are now scared about having a family life here because I haven't mentioned the fact that they're saying that your right to leave can be torn up within 20 to 30 years. So you can be here for 20 to 30 years, pay taxes, build a life, buy a home, have a family, and the UK government is saying that actually we can determine that we're going to kick you out. It's causing chaos and pain and stress for people who have done nothing wrong but try to secure a better and safer life for them and their families. Labour. And the final story for this section on politics is the leak of the Ministry of Justice briefing that took place this week, where the new Deputy Prime Minister and Lord Chancellor David Lammy, and I say Deputy Prime Minister because it's also been leaked that he's telling everyone, don't write about me as an MP anymore. When you refer to me, you have to refer to me as Deputy Prime Minister because he's been elevated up. So he loves his new title, but he's also the Lord Chancellor. And what has Lammy done? Well, Lammy has signed off on a plan restricting jury trials to a narrow band of serious offences. And these are the most serious offences: murder, manslaughter, rape, and he's also added cases passing the public interest test. That's a very dangerous, that last one there, because that means that if Farage or some rednecks decide that an immigrant kind of like who has crossed the zebra crossing, without waiting for traffic lights and jaywalking, poses a threat to the public, then they can also be deprived of a jury trial. I'm being facetious for that last example, but this passing a public interest test is really, that's a very dangerous loophole in there. But regardless of that, the fact that Lammy is now signing off on Leverson's review of the criminal court system in England and Wales, which is expected to be published this week, and it looks likely that he's going to follow through on this recommendation of the creation of what they're calling intermediate courts, which sit without a jury to try some offences, is terrifying. Now, this is a bizarre scenario now, because I've put two little images in the bottom of Lammy there, because the person who opposed this idea, which, surprise, surprise, used to be Lammy himself, just like Mahmoud before was in support of Palestinian rights and against the genocide, and now she's anti-migrant and pro-white supremacy. Lammy, when he had the Lammy report looking into the criminal justice system, he said, well, especially when he was in opposition, and these are his exact words: juries being replaced by judges and magistrates is effectively the establishment, rather than your peers who live in the community deciding what justice should be. This was his own words. He is the one who said that jury trials are a fundamental part of our democratic entitlement or settlement, and criminal trials without juries are a bad idea. And now, that was in 2020. A few years later, power hungry, power mad, whatever it is, he's now saying no more jury trials in particular cases. And what we know is that more trials without jury will disadvantage people from minority ethnic backgrounds. It will lead to more miscarriages of justice. And if you want to know the statistics in the UK, let's be very clear. Amongst the magistrates, which we call police courts in the Pan-African community, we know they're police courts, 14% of them are from an ethnic minority background or community. And this is according to the judicial diversity statistics. And if we look at the 2021 census, we know that 19% of the people in England and Wales are from a minority ethnic background. At least 4% of them back then were of African heritage. So we have this disproportionate misrepresentation or underrepresentation of people with African heritage in the criminal justice system. And David Lammy now wants to remove that bulkhead. It's kind of like what's that word? That guard, that final dialogue against the states, kind of like making unjust like decisions and unjust rulings from people, and they're justifying it on the basis of savings, cost savings. Saying that the justice system has been overrun, it's inefficient. They need to cut costs. The quickest way to do that is have a judge make decisions rather than pay for juries and go through all of that. Well, this is horrific. If you know how few cases juries hear, do you understand why it's important that we do have that bulwark there? Oh, my voice again. That's the last one from that story. You'll be hearing more from this as time goes by, I'm afraid. Just watch again how Labour politicians are flip-flopping. One moment they're liberal, then they're hard far right. They're flip-flopping, and because they are kind of like exempt from the decisions or the implications of their decisions, they're making rules that are inhumane. Okay. Now, sorry, I'm taking another sweep. You are watching the Gary's Pan-African Community News Update. If you are watching live, you're welcome, as I say always, to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. I don't know if Sister Oleander's still with us, or you've been very, very quiet today. No comments? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
Just
Yeah, I mean, just a few comments. Amapoku says totally inhumane policy. And she also says power and status has gone to Lammy's head.
It does seem to be that way, unfortunately. And thank you for joining us and being with us today. Thank you, Sister Oleander. So just a reminder, it's your program. You're welcome to subscribe, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful. But the next section, we've been speaking a lot about justice. Well, let's go to policing stories over the past 2 weeks. I get scared about what happens in 2 weeks. It's actually petrifying sometimes. So the first story, now this is a chronologically quite a tricky one. I won't go into all the details, but this is the Scotland's Chief Constable Joe Farrell. And what we've now found out is that she reinstated a racist police officer whose name is Katie Barrett. I tried to find the image of her for you, but of course I couldn't find it. And PC Katie Barrett had been sacked for racially abusing takeaway staff. Now, the reason why this has come up again, because that took place in 2019, is that we now know that Farrell, who is the woman in the picture, who was the head of the police, overturned the dismissal. But it took a high court later on to reverse that decision and rule that the original sacking was correct. And this is very scary. If you think about what it means to have someone right at the top of the policing in Scotland, right in the leadership, and then reversing decisions where someone is using blatant racism and trying to bring them back into the force. Now, this story has kind of like outraged many people, and it's led to the family of Sheku Bahu, who you may remember as the young man who was killed. I supposed to say he died in custody, like he just died like that after being restrained by a number of officers. Now, right now, the case of Sheku Bahu is actually, undergoing what's supposed to be a public inquiry into this incident, but that inquiry is looking like it's going to close. It's going because of a police legal challenge. So the police are doing everything they can do to collapse that inquiry. I'm not even going to pretend that inquiries bring about justice, but they do start the process towards justice. You might have heard about the COVID inquiry. There's been a recognition that there was an unnecessary death that took place. Will anyone be prosecuted for that? No, but at least it's a step in the right direction. We know similar things with the Grenfell situation. We're waiting for criminal prosecution. When that recent fire took place, was it in Japan? I'm not sure. My bad. It took place. I think if there was I think like 3 or 6, no, sorry, 6 took place. And it didn't take long for the government to actually. I think it was Japan. No, Hong Kong. That's right. It was in Hong Kong. My bad. It took like a few days for the police to arrest those people who made decisions about those constructions. This is before an inquiry. So in this particular case, the inquiry looks like it's going to collapse, and it's shocking to find out that the head of the police in Scotland has backed this racist constable, who clearly had been fired, blatant racism, and tried to bring him back into the police force. I'm not going to go through much more of that, just in case you want to know what did PC Katie Barrett do. Well, she referred to the staff at the Spice of Punjab restaurant in Newcastle with racist language at least 5 times during a drunken conversation on a night out with fellow officers. So she really went for it, and she was disciplined and kicked her off the force. So that's that story. Another policing story. This is a story about. I can't even believe I'm saying this. West Yorkshire Police have apologised for trying to arrest a man wanted on recall to prison during a memorial service at a church in Leeds. Now, I say they have apologised. I don't know if it's enough, because what happened was that there was a memorial to this elder, and with no care, no sensitivity, no patience, I mean, they just barged in and pushed around the congregation, disrespectful to the bishop who was delivering the service. It was outrageous. It was a complete violation of the family, the friends, and the community, while they wanted to remember a long-standing member of the congregation at the New Testament Church of God in Leeds. And this took place on the 30th of November. The reason why I seem exacerbated is because I watched the video, and it's available online. That you can actually watch the testimony from the Bishop Tony Parry. He tells you what happened. And I won't be able to do it justice. It's a very powerful testimony. And he said it was intolerable what happened. He said that there were many people there thanking God for the life of their beloved sister when the police entered the building. Yes, the police have apologized. But if you watch the video, it's a short video. I suggest you search for it. Bishop Tony Parry, and listen to him. And he asks us this question. He says, would the police have behaved in such a way if it were a mosque or a synagogue? And I think we know the answer to that one. This was a service for African people. This was a sacred ritual. And they burst into that place, pushing people around, disrespect. I mean, if they suspected someone was trying to get to the funeral and that person was a threat to public safety, they could have intervened before the service. They could have maintained a discreet, like a boundary around church, so afterwards when he was leaving or whoever the person was. But no, they went into the church to seize that person. And I'm going to leave that story there. This is policing in the UK. Outrageous. And then this is just basically a report. It won't come as any surprise to you that new figures have shown that there's been a 108% increase in racism-related claims compared with previous year. And this is now the highest level recorded across the past 5 years. And we know this because of freedom of information requests, which cover new claims between 2019 and 2024, was cited. The numbers have fluctuated from year to year, but we also know the College of Policing data shows that the Metropolitan Police have dismissed 183 officers in a year to 31st of March 2025 out of 735 dismissals across all UK forces. That's a huge amount. there is something rotten inside the Metropolitan Police. Absolutely rotten if they are dismissing 183 officers out of 735 for that whole year. It's good that the rising claims is also due partly to scrutiny of the Met's internal culture. And we know this because we've spoken about the Casey review, which looked into racism and misconduct. We've also spoken about the 30 Patterns of Harms review. We talked about that in the last program, which was itself commissioned by the Met, which concluded that amphiphobia is baked into the institutional design of the police force. So we know something's wrong. And we now have evidence to back that up. It's not just testimony and qualitative data. We now have quantitative data. We have to keep our eye on these kind of things. I'm going to leave it there. The next story is it's a legacy story. I'm not going to spend much time on this one. But we now, I'm talking about inquiries and this, what's going on. We know that our elder, Toyin Lawrence, mother of Stephen Lawrence, has now spoken out about her disbelief that undercover officers were tasked with finding information to smear and destroy her family at its time of grief. Now, she has told the public inquiry into undercover policing that she only wants to be treated the same as any other family by the police. And now we know that even though her son, Stephen, was murdered by a racist gang of at least 5 or 6 attackers in April 1993, only 2 of them, let's be clear, have ever been brought to justice. Now, while that investigation was taking place, the police had put undercover officer, and you can see his image on the screen, Peter Francis, and he was tasked with gathering information to smear the Lawrence family. Now, the police deny this. He himself admits it, but the police deny this. He's a whistleblower. He whistleblowed in 2014. And our elder Lawrence is saying that, look, if they were able to put that amount of resources and attention into discrediting us as a family, if they'd put that amount of energy into seeking to find Stephen's murderers, we wouldn't be sitting here today. So I'm going to leave that there and just remind you of the history. And it's another inquiry. So we're finding the stuff. If we get to a state of inquiry when we're dealing with these things, it's often too late. The harm has been done. The families have been ripped to pieces. The trauma has been embedded. But this is something else we need to be aware of. The inquiry is still going. It's still ongoing, I think. And the last story for this section is more follow-up on the Panorama story that we spoke about. My voice is going in today. Sorry. On the Panorama story. And another officer, a 7th officer based at Charing Cross Police Station, has been sacked following the BBC investigation. This is the one who expressed Islamophobic views. His name was PC Sean Park. You couldn't find images of him online. But he pretended not to see an alleged excessive use of force by another officer who is said to have stamped on a detainee's ankle. So this is the kind of thing you have to understand. It's like even if he himself did not stand on someone's ankle or kick him in the head or whatever it was, because he claims that he didn't see it, he sanctions that behavior. It enables the culture that emboldens other officers to do the same. Now, October's Panorama program showed officers calling for migrants to be shot. It reveled in the use of force, such as what I've explained, and it was dismissive of rape claims. It was horrendous. Now, one of the police senior officers, Simon Messenger, said the comments and the actions were appalling, and it's absolutely right. It was entirely right that he's lost his job. He was fired for breaching standards of professional behavior, for authority, respect, and courtesy, blah, 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 and all this other stuff. Reporting public conduct and equality and diversity. This all stuff is coming from Scotland Yard. The bottom line, it's good that he's gone. But how many more of them are there? You see, because this investigation came from the BBC. This investigation did not come from the police. This investigation didn't even come from the detainee who was abused. And that's a really important part to remember. That if someone has been abused with force by a police officer and he does not complain or she does not complain because they're frightened that that officer might come round to their house later on or there'll be repercussions for it. What's happening and what should be clear to us all now is that this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm so thankful that that stupid phrase, a few rotten apples, has finally been laid to rest. That used to do my head in. So, I mean, that's the last story on that particular section, and there's more to come. Oof. Okay. You are watching the Galleys Pan-African Community News Update. I'll say, as I always do, if you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Yeah. What do I say? Subscribe. Yeah, you can subscribe. You can hit the like button. You can share it. Just copy and paste the links, whatever. If you're not watching live, then it's recorded, so you can watch it at another time and share it in WhatsApp and all that sort of stuff. But if you are watching live, the chat's going. Please, you're welcome to share comments. Sister Oleander's online, so she can run on that, and we're happy to kind of address anything we can. But right now, the next section is a review of expressions of white supremacy and violent Afrophobia in the UK, around the UK, and for the last fortnight. And I'm going to start off with, unfortunately, I've got an image of the police, but it's actually government policy really that's caused this. And we spoke about this, so I don't need to go on for much longer. But essentially, the decision to reveal the ethnicity and nationality of suspects in high-profile crimes has had a devastating effect. And this is actually helping to spread prejudice. This is what the comments of racial justice campaigners are saying. And when we say racial justice campaigners, we're talking specifically of the Runnymede Trust and 50 other groups demanding that the policy in England and Wales is scrapped. Now, this is a recent development. We have spoken about this, I think, in the last couple of programs, so I don't need to say too much, but they sent a letter to the Home Secretary and police chiefs. I spoke about the incident on the train and the media reporting of the ethnicity and nationality of a suspect, and including innocent people. But the research by these organizations has shown that the policy introduced in August, and this policy was given, it was led by Starmer, and I think it was Yvette Cooper at the time. She was Home Secretary. So it's Starmer and Cooper. So they're telling the police that they should share this information. They've found out that ever since that's happened, the term asylum seeker has appeared in articles on serious crimes 5 times more than before the policy change. So again, we're seeing quantitative information, quantitative evidence showing that this red flagging, this kind of saying that any serious crime, the first go to in your head is an asylum seeker. And what the groups are saying in this letter, they're saying that the public has been given a harmful impression that falsely links criminality with ethnicity or migration status. And that in turn is helping to further tear at society's fabric by feeding prejudice. Now, of course, this all initiated, or this iteration of this far-right expression in the UK, because obviously this goes back decades, but this iteration was started up again with the Southport attacks in 2024, when it was falsely claimed it was committed by an asylum seeker. And I think we had Musk and Farage and all those kind of and Yaxley, which led to the riots, when the truth was the attacker was a British national. So keep our eyes open for this one. Unfortunately, this is not going to go away, and this has been caused directly by the policy of the Labour government. The next story is also related, and this is all part of the same continuum. There's been a poll by YouGov, and they've found out that 52% of adults from the UK's minority ethnic communities has said that the St. George's flag is now a racist symbol. And that compares to 36% of adults with European heritage. And this is quite shocking, because I would have said that before campaigns like this summer's Operation Raise the Colours, which saw English and UK flags being attached to lamp poles and telegraph poles and other forms of public infrastructure. That wasn't the case. People, saw the English flag and it was football. But now it's quite, even I have that sense. If I walk down a house and I see those flags around, I suspect that those inside those families or in that area, that there are some racists who want to do me harm. That's just, you can't help but have that feeling. And so now this poll was saying that over half of the adults, minority ethnic community, feel the same, and even a third of European adults are saying the same thing. Now, this is not an easy thing to sort out. Both groups, Africans and Europeans and Asians and people from different backgrounds, are seeing this lamppost campaign as spreading an anti-migrant, asylum seeker message, and it's not really about patriotism, as the politicians are claiming. It's pretty much about immigration again. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. But again, these are more facts and stats to kind of like let us be aware of what's taking place in the UK at this particular moment in time. And the final story for this section. Farage. The Reform UK leader, Nigel Farage, has insisted, and get this, that he has never directly racially abused anybody. So he's done it indirectly with his racist comments, but never directly racially abused anybody. And this is a response coming after 20 people he went to school with said that he was racist, that while they were at school, he was racist. Now he's saying that, no, what I did, it was banter. It was just playground banter on the playground. It was nothing intentional like this. And, when he was asked, what do you mean that you've never directly kind of like racially abused anybody? He says, well, by taking it out on an individual on the basis of who they are or what they are. But what we now know from some of those 20 people, I think it's gone up. I think it was 20 people initially. I think actually the number's gone up, if I remember correctly. What some of those people are saying is that, no. While Farage was at school, he was joking about, Jewish people being put in gas chambers. He actually put another pupil in detention because he didn't like the colour of their skin. This is when he was a prefect. He's gone on. But Farage is adamant. Have I said things 50 years ago that you could interpret as being banter on the playground? Yes, I've said some stuff. But did I, ever hurt anyone, or say something, or abuse someone in a hurtful or insulting way? Well, no. This is the case. And it's just fascinating because I don't know how you engage with racism in a way that isn't hurtful or insulting. I just don't get it. How can you how can you tell something that's racist that isn't hurtful or abusive? Is it just me? This is Farage. He's the leader of the party. The BBC put him on Question Time every 5 minutes. He's always on the news. This is a major political figure. He's the one who led the charge to take Britain out of the EU and caused the Brexit. He's an establishment figure. And this is pretty much like the orange one in the White House. People know exactly what he is, but they still support him. And that says a lot about the country at this particular moment in time. Let's close the section with that one. And let's leave the UK for a second and look at some world news. And it is important to remember this is a Pan-African program. And even though we are focused on news stories affecting people based in the UK, we do like to cover the odd world news. We can't cover loads of world news, obviously. It's outside our remit. And so a couple of stories. Okay. The first is, I spoke about, what's happened to our princess being abandoned by the government and prevented from joining her parents in the UK after Hurricane Melissa. So what's the ramifications of Hurricane Melissa? What's taking place? Well, Jamaica's opposition leader, Mark Golding, has said, look, we need to rebuild with transparency, fairness, and unity, because the hurricane has devastated part of the island. It's cut off communities, it's destroyed homes, and it's crippling agriculture. Now, there are blocked roads, collapsed power lines, no clean water. But what he's saying in particular is that there's a lot of concern that the distribution of relief will not be done in a fair way. And there's a feeling that government MPs and their supporters will get preferential treatment. Now, he has said it's just a perception, but it's a deep rooted thing. So people from the diaspora, those of us in the UK, those of us around Europe, around the world, are writing, and we are also calling for greater transparency regarding how the relief funds will be spent. And Mr. Golding has written to the Prime Minister Andrew Holness, saying, look, we need a bipartisan, multi-stakeholder task force involving churches, NGOs, the private sector, and both political parties to oversee the relief fairly. And this, to me, seems like a reasonable request. It's one of the problems that happens after these kind of disasters, and when a whole load of money comes in, which is kind of like charitable contributions, is that while there are some amazing people who do some great work with that, and I think we spoke about those young princesses a couple of weeks ago who are trying to raise a couple of £1,000 to help contribute. So there's a lot of people, goodwill, doing the right thing. There are those who just see the money and they use it to enrich themselves at the cost of others. And so, a task force that's bipartisan with all the key stakeholders sounds like a fantastic idea. The next story, which is you've got to laugh. The orange one in the White House. I don't really like to refer to Trump by name. Too many people are talking about him, and it does his ego. So I tend to refer to him as the orange one in the White House. Okay, the American president, the current American president. The current American president said that he's going to bar South Africa from attending next year's G20 summit on American soil. And President Cyril Ramaphosa has said that's just a bloody insult. And he just reminded everyone, look, as a member of the bloc, we don't even need an invitation to a G20 event. Now, the problem with that is, of course, the US president can just make up rules and kind of stop his entry into the country. But that's the point. Now, why has this taken place? Well, this is because South Africa had rejected the United States' suggestion to hand over the presidency to the summit this year. And as a result of that, they sent no delegations to the G20 meeting. And they have just ignored and refused to sign the declaration that came, which asks for more attention to issues that affect countries in the global south. So Washington and the White House has expressed its opposition to South Africa's agenda, especially the parts that focus on climate change. It's just blanked the nation. And it's important to remember that this doesn't come from nowhere. The US, or the current US president, has been targeting South Africa since he returned to office at the start of this year, calling the nation anti-American for its foreign policy. And it's also because he was in bed with Elon Musk, one of the beneficiaries of apartheid, and they were spreading ridiculous stories about there being a genocide of Europeans in Azania. I say Azania, which is a traditional name, the original name for the region called South Africa. And so this is just spite playing itself out on a global stage. But it's important that we understand these politics. So next year, when there's a G20, if we find out that South Africa is not present, it's not because they've done anything wrong. It's because this juvenile form of politics, which is supposed to be, kind of democratic practice under the rule of law, is actually just doing what it does. The last story for this section is one I'm happy about and I'm not sure about. It's a very strange one. I come and bounce back and forth with this one. And this is where we found out that Malian authorities are hopeful that the use of AI tools will help students learn to read and write in local languages, because they already speak in those languages with their family and friends, which is a good issue, right? I mean, we speak. If we can learn in a language that we already speak, then it turbocharges our ability to grow and to learn and to improve. But what they've done to achieve this goal, the education ministry has called on an organization called Robots Mali, which is an AI, generative AI-based company that has produced more than 100 stories in Bambara, which is the most widely spoken language in Mali, for students to read in schools. And the organization itself is saying it helps provide solutions to the lack of books in Malian languages. So this is a really positive story, right? Because it's keeping indigenous languages alive, and it's making them the lingua franca inside schools as well. And I suspect as long as these children are still speaking French, they're still speaking Bambara, so they have a language that doesn't disrespect them, that's rich, that's cultural heritage, and they can also communicate around the world using a European language if need be. And this is important because after Mali gained independence from France in 1960, several attempts were made to replace French language education with languages like Bambara, but these continuously failed due to lack of resources and also, to be honest, a lack of political will. So the fact that this company is recognizing that there's I won't say a market, but there's a need for Bambara in schools. Students are happy about this. And we should be happy about this. I suspect my concern is really around the way that generative AI technology works, and how if it's archiving and kind of like scraping, because that's what it does. It takes kind of like linguistic resources and cannibalizes it and then repackages it out. I need to have confidence in the company that it's been done in an ethical manner, because it's another issue about the exploitation of human creativity for commercial gain. We're seeing it with I don't know if you've seen those what they call AI artists, where now they're using some of the most famous singers in the world, some of the most gifted and amazing performers who's taken years to learn their craft, learn their instrument, learn to sing, to write beautiful songs, and they're just making this dross. They call it AI slop, where you can get Michael Jackson singing Thriller in the style of a Western and whatever. And I find a lot of this stuff very disrespectful. There was a moment when it was a little bit funny at first because it was novel. But now it's kind of like, you can take someone like Malcolm and then get him to speak like he's a Teletubby. And I find this stuff really, disrespectful. So the potential of this is great. Of course, I want African languages taught in African schools. An idea of actually propelling it into the future and have its value is amazing. But we have to be mindful of the technology and the abuse of that technology. Okay, that's the last story in that section. I think we're doing good time. It's the last section. This is you're listening. I keep saying you're listening like it was our Jan Sapper radio program, and we've moved on. This is YouTube. I can't believe the technology now. I can stream live and you can see me and talk and all this kind of stuff. But you are watching the Games by Left Community News Update. If you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share if you find it useful. We're going to look at some of the positive news relating to our community over the past couple of weeks. Let me see if I can play a track in the background. This is a total experiment, so hopefully you'll be able to talk in with a nice mood and it's not too loud. And this really comes from the Agbetu radio program. Not done this before. It might work, might not. But let me get going. If you want to say something, this is the time to send a message. Fine. So, we'd have to take that down a bit more. Okay. So, Oleander.
Yeah, it's a little loud.
Okay, thank you. Is that a bit better?
Yeah, sorry. Okay.
Apologies. Thank you. So where are we? Right. Okay. So NHS North East London, the ICB, Integrated Care Board, has announced the appointment of Dr. Nena Osuji as its new chief executive. And now you can see the image of our sister. She's got a strong track record as a senior leader in NHS, and she joins NHS North East London and the Royal Free London, where she serves as Chief Executive for North Middlesex University Hospital and Community Services. Now, she's got a distinguished background. Prior to this, she served as Deputy Chief Executive at Croydon Health Service, NHS Trust, and she has a pedigree in academia and teaching as an experienced haematology consultant and continues to practice. So we just kind of like bigging her up and recognising this appointment and wish her good luck on her journey. Next story is the two brothers, the founders of Original Flavour, Craig and Sean McAnuff, who were so moved by the damage caused by Hurricane Melissa that they had a cook-a-thon on the 20th of November, raising £2,500 for the relief effort. I spoke about how many of us in the diaspora got involved in raising funds. We try to do that when we can. The duo themselves, both of Jamaican heritage, said seeing how the places they visited during a recent visit have been affected by the disaster, they had to take action. And they're referring to the fact that they went over to Jamaica and went to schools and reached out to children and then watched on the news as those same spaces were destroyed. They said that we saw so many videos surfed on social media, and obviously there's a connection with Jamaica for our grandparents, as well as the fact that we were there teaching kids in Westmoreland. We felt it was right that we used our purpose that Caribbean culture has given us to give back. I think it's a lovely sentiment, recognising that we can all contribute and give back, especially those of us in diaspora, who have certain privileges that many of our family back at home, whether it's on the continent or in the Americas, don't really have. Unfortunately, I did find a protest and a boycott that was taking place to support the families in Sudan, but it happened before we went on air. We all can do something to give back. The next story is Yolanda Brown's Soul Mama in Stratford has been such a big hit. This is where she's opened up a restaurant, that she's opened a second one up on Westfield's The Street, and it will be once again part restaurant, part music venue. Now, the new location will have a slightly larger menu alongside dishes from the original, and it's going to have slow-cooked Caribbean curries, one pot with rice and peas, and sharing dishes. I sound like an advert. I think the most important part for me is that alongside the food, there will be music, and there's going to be a stage front and centre. So it's just sharing a little bit. Wow, technology. Yeah, so they'll be announcing the music program closer to the opening. So just saying that. I mean, I can't remember. Did Levi Roots place closed down? We used to go there. I don't know if this is going to be in the same spot where that was, or if there's going to be like two options in there. I think it closed down, but I can't remember. Was it him or was it Jamie Oliver's place that closed down? Either way, there's more of us opening up. And I know one story we saw BBC News this week, BBC London News this week, was not my kettle of fish, but there was a new pub for the Mobos as well popping up in London. But hey, Okay. The next story, meet one Carl Brown. He's a Bristol lawyer who won this year's Alexander Bustamante Award for his dedication to promoting equality, diversity and inclusion in the legal profession. Now, his parents emigrated to UK from Jamaica in the 1960s, and he said he hopes to carry the baton from all those who have gone before him. And he's give us a quote: "If we can make a profession such as law inclusive, and people feel like they can actually be themselves and thrive by being themselves, and to me, everyone's a winner." And it's a very important comment to think about. Many of the stories we're speaking about today have been involved in policing and law, the judiciary. So it's very important that we're involved in all of these sections. And I think there's just a couple more stories. This one is Croydon's After School Patrol, Croydon's Community Action Guardians, CCAG, that's the acronym. And this is a group that formed in October, I think it's 2023, after the murder of the 15-year-old Princess Elena. And that was a tragic story. But they set themselves up. They started with 4 to 5 volunteers, and they gave in time throughout the working week. And they're now at 20 members. And this now includes parents, youth workers, and even former teachers. And what they do essentially is patrol around the area of Croydon, especially after 3 p.m. when thousands of students leave school. And this is quite important to Croydon, because almost a fifth of Croydon's population is aged 17 or under. And that makes it the highest youth population of any London borough. I used to think it was Hackney that had the largest youth population, but now Croydon seems to be right up ahead, which is why we probably see so much of that live facial recognition software up there without our consent, even though there are members of our community saying they do agree to it. Anyway, almost all of the members of the Croydon Community Action Guardians has said that emotional intelligence was at the heart of what they do. It's right at the core. And they use their conflict resolution skills to de-escalate tensions and to encourage young people to avoid conflict when traveling or socializing with friends. And they give examples of kind of situations that happen. But it's a good story as far as I'm concerned. It's good to see our community self-organizing. It reminds me very much of the work that the Black Panther used to do when we talk about our breakfast clubs and kind of like the other kind of programs as well. And then the final story for this week is the African dance program at Sadler's Wells. Now, it was supposed to start moving. It was a little video, but clearly it's decided not to work today. Okay, for those of us who are interested in dance, Sadler's Wells had a digital platform with short films. I didn't realize this. There was a discount for store tickets to see a group called Ballet Black. And it came too late, it came before the program. And so there was no point in me sharing it. But I went on their website looking to see what else was going on. I didn't realize that they had like a ballet, which, with African dancers. And they have this digital platform which has short films and documentaries. Some of them are going to expire soon. So if you want to watch them, check it out. But just go online, and it's just beautiful. This one's Dancing at Dusk. There's one about rituals. And it's just a reminder that I tend to engage with the theatre more. I tend to like seeing plays, etc. And I haven't been for quite a while. But of course, those of us interested in dance as well as music, there are also other kind of like venues and opportunities to engage, and of course to support. We speak a lot about some of the negatives that are affecting our community, but we also need to engage in much of the beauty and the creativity and the artistic genius of our community. So I want to end really with that one. If you're interested, check it out. Sadler's Wells website. Watch some African dance. This is some music, and I think that's it. Yeah, I think there we go. Thank you. Sister Oleander, with us still? Yes.
Yeah, just to say it's time to go, and well done for getting it done just under an hour and a half. That's great.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, 90 minutes. We've hit the target. That's pretty impressive. Well, thank you for managing the chats. Been a bit quiet today, but give thanks to everyone's here and participating and supporting. And as always, want to give thanks to Sister Angie, Brother Colin, Sister Emma, everyone who provides research and others who sent stories to us. Just so you know, our next broadcast is on Sunday, the 14th of December at 6 p.m. as ever. That's going to be our last one. I think that's our last one because we only run during the academic term, so we'll be back in January. But in the meantime, be safe. You know what I think. If things you want to do something, you're not happy with the way things are, join a collective, preferably a Pan-African organization. Don't forget to support the many community organizations, journalists, presenters, doing their best work, some working in the mainstream, whether it's politics, whether it's the media. And I think I'm done. And Sister Oleander, anything you want to say? Or I think you...
No, just everybody walk good, and it's getting colder, so do try to keep warm. And yeah, so we'll see you back here again on the 14th, Sunday, the 14th of December.
Excellent. So whatever you do, please be safe. That's all I understood. And may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.
Ashe.